This is Newsday on the BBC. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore. The headlines. Myanmar hits back over its handling of the Rohingya crisis, rejecting criticism of Aung San Suu Kyi by a veteran U.S. diplomat. Casey Affleck pulls out of presenting an award at next month's Oscars. He has been under pressure over claims of sexual harassment, which he denies.
Hello, I'm Ben Bland here in London. Also in the programme, Donald Trump warns the Palestinians that he will cut hundreds of millions of dollars of aid unless they cooperate with the US.
That money is on the table, and that money is not going to them unless they sit down and negotiate peace. Because I can tell you that Israel does want to make peace.
And from dancer to soldier to TV sensation, how China's answer to Oprah Winfrey is chasing viewers by challenging conventions.
Live from our studios in Singapore and London. This is BBC World News. It's Newsday.
Glad you could join us. It's 9 in the morning here in Singapore, 1 a.m. in London, and 7:30 in the morning in Naypyidaw, where Myanmar's government has accused the former U.S. diplomat Bill Richardson of carrying out a personal attack on Aung San Suu Kyi. Mr. Richardson resigned from a Burmese investigation into violence in Rakhine State, calling it a whitewash. He was particularly critical of Ms. Suu Kyi, saying she lacked moral leadership. Our Southeast Asia correspondent Jonathan Head has more.
For 5 months, Myanmar's Rakhine State has burnt and smouldered. Its Muslim population has fled in staggering numbers. And the reputation of its once untouchable leader has been irreparably tainted. Aung San Suu Kyi has responded by promising to implement changes proposed by former UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan, and by inviting a board of statesmen to advise her, among them an old friend. Bill Richardson is a former US governor and one-time ambassador to the UN, with a long-standing commitment to Myanmar.
Aung San Suu Kyi also stressed her desire for a genuine, high-level dialogue with the Burmese government.
In the early 1990s, he was among the first diplomats to visit Aung San Suu Kyi when she was under house arrest. So his sudden resignation from the board is a blow. And he had some withering comments about Ms. Suu Kyi's unwillingness to listen.
I think the advisory board is a whitewash. It's to support Aung San Suu Kyi's policies. I thought it would be independent, that they would take our advice on the Rohingya crisis, on the citizenship issue, human rights. But instead, it's just a validation of her policies.
This is the headquarters of Aung San Suu Kyi's party, the NLD, and it's a place Bill Richardson would have come to back in the 1990s when he was campaigning for the then democracy leader's release. There were always people then to speak for her when she was under house arrest. But today, we've been unable to find anyone to respond to the extraordinary criticism that the former US governor has made about her. Bill Richardson isn't alone in his disenchantment with the Burmese leader. Kin Zaw-win spent 11 years in prison for criticising the military. He's not afraid to criticise now.
She's a very difficult person to work with. We thought that having Bill Richardson on board would help because they are personal friends. Bill had helped her in those days when she was under house arrest, For things to turn out this way, I think it's very dismal and also very disappointing.
But the other members of the advisory board are continuing their work, arguing that it's too soon to judge the Myanmar government's efforts to fix the Rakhine conflict.
I think Mr. Richardson was a little bit in a hurry to make that statement. I think it's unfair. And like the statement says, it's not a legitimate statement by him.
Already in the areas where there was fighting last August, now there's rebuilding. Transit camps are being prepared for returning refugees. But there is still almost no access for the media or the United Nations. No accountability for human rights violations, no guarantee of safety for those who fled. It's hard to call this progress yet. Jonathan Head, BBC News, Yangon.
The actor Casey Affleck has pulled out of this year's Oscars ceremony. He won Best Actor last year for Manchester by the Sea, and in keeping with tradition, he was due to attend this year to present the award for Best Actress. Casey Affleck has been accused of sexual harassment by female crew members on previous films, claims which he denies. A little earlier, I spoke to our correspondent in Los Angeles, James Cook, to find out if we had any more details on his reasons for withdrawing from the ceremony.
Well, what we know is that this dates back, as you say, to these previous allegations against Casey Affleck, which date back to 2010. And he settled out of court, and since then hasn't, in fact, offered any kind of comment, public denial or otherwise, on the allegations against him, which were made by these two women, a cinematographer and a producer. But he paid an undisclosed settlement to them out of court, and really from then on, his career, nonetheless, went from strength to strength, culminating in last year's award at the Academy Awards, an Oscar for his performance in Manchester by the Sea. But, of course, everything has changed in Hollywood since the downfall of the producer, the powerful producer Harvey Weinstein. The atmosphere is completely different this year than it was last year. There was some murmuring of discontent last year about his Best Actor award. This year, people are not putting up with it, and he has taken, I think, the wise decision not to attend.
And just briefly, James, has the Academy said anything about what they're going to do instead?
No, they haven't given any detail about exactly what they're going to do instead. They say they're glad that this decision has been taken because it enables people to focus on the show and on what they call the great work of the past year. It'll be interesting to see, though, because there was such an outpouring of protest at the Golden Globes, how the Oscars, which is traditionally a more austere affair, responds to that, and whether or not it can carry forward the momentum which is building here in Hollywood from women for better treatment and also better working conditions.
Our correspondent in Los Angeles, James Cook there. Some other stories making the news today. Hindu hardliners have ransacked shops, burnt vehicles and clashed with police in parts of northern India during protests against a Bollywood film. Padmavat is a period drama about a relationship between a Hindu queen and a Muslim ruler. Hindu extremist groups say the film distorts history. Despite the threats, the film still opened in 5,000 cinemas. A high-speed train caught fire in China's Anhui province following what's believed to have been an electrical fault. No casualties were reported. 3 fire engines attended the blaze, which was quickly brought under control. The cause of the incident is being investigated. Now, in sport, Jose Mourinho has extended his contract as manager at Manchester United until 2020 with an option for another year. His previous deal was due to expire next year. Mourinho said he was delighted that United felt he was the right manager.
President Trump is attending the World Economic Forum in the Swiss ski resort of Davos. He's the first U.S. president to show up in 18 years, and he says he has come as a salesman-in-chief for the United States. But he also has something to say about politics, in particular, peace in the Middle East. He met up with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and had words for the Palestinian leadership as well. They refused to meet with Vice President Mike Pence last week after Mr. Trump unilaterally decided to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Mr. Trump was not impressed.
When they disrespected us a week ago by not allowing our great Vice President to see them, and we give them hundreds of millions of dollars in aid and support, tremendous numbers, numbers that nobody understands. That money is on the table, and that money is not going to them unless they sit down and negotiate peace. Because I can tell you that Israel does want to make peace, and they're going to have to want to make peace too, or we're going to have nothing to do with it any longer.
There was an immediate reaction from the Palestinians. The ambassador to Washington, Dr. Hussam Zomlot, told the BBC earlier that only an international body could oversee peace talks in the region.
The most important thing is that we solidify, strengthen our commitment as Palestinians, and the Palestinian president has been clear that we remain absolutely committed to the two-state solution on the 1967. We remain committed to international consensus and international law. We remain committed to non-violence, and we remain committed to our adherence to a genuine peace process. And that peace process requires international intervention. For many, many years, we were made the exception. In all other conflicts, it was only international mechanisms for implementing international principles that did deliver success. Now we are saying, no way, we need an international table. President Trump has not taken Jerusalem off the table, he has taken the table altogether. We need to establish a genuine table that can actually deliver us where we want to go.
And that was Dr. Hussam Zomrot. Well, it is the second day of the ASEAN-India Commemorative Summit in India. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be holding bilateral meetings with leaders of the Southeast Asian countries. And the summit marks 25 years of Indo-ASEAN relations. And this comes hot off the heels of Mr. Modi's appearance at the World Economic Forum in Davos, where he gave an address on Tuesday. Earlier, I spoke to PK Basu, an economist and author of the book Asia Reborn, and asked him how much the summit between ASEAN and India is actually about China and its rising influence in the region.
Well, it certainly has a little bit to do with that, but there are independent relationships between ASEAN and India that are growing. India, of course, is a countervailing force to China on the security sphere, but economic relations are particularly important for the next 10 or 15 years because as China slows, as China has a struggle with its financial system, the importance of India as an economic partner is going to rise. And India is going to be of growing importance in terms of trade, and that relationship.
But China also has huge investments in many Southeast Asian countries. Who does Mr. Modi have to win over from these Southeast Asian countries to be a strong supporter of India rather than China?
Well, among the ASEAN countries, I'd say that Indonesia, Singapore, and Vietnam are particularly close to India. They see India as a particularly important partner. And I think those three in particular are very keen on developing the relationship. Among the ones that are especially close to China, I would say, are Cambodia and Laos. So winning them over to understanding the importance of a balanced relationship is quite important too.
But PK, does India have the confidence to counter China's dominance in the region?
Well, I don't think India is seeking to counter China that much. India is not a member of the Belt and Road Initiative. It's not going to participate in OBOR. But India is the second largest shareholder of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and is the single biggest borrower from it at the moment. So there are good relationships between China and India. Of course, there are border disputes, very significant ones across the Himalayas. And China's 9-dash line in the South China Sea is something that most ASEAN members are extremely wary of and would like to repudiate.
PK Basu, a political and economic analyst. You're watching Newsday on the BBC, live from Singapore and London. Still to come on the program. Challenging conventions in China. We talk to TV sensation Jin Qing. Welcome back, everyone. You're watching Newsday on the BBC. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore.
That's great to have you with us. I'm Ben Bland in London. Our top stories. Myanmar has hit back over its handling of the Rohingya crisis, rejecting criticism of Aung San Suu Kyi by a veteran US diplomat.
Casey Affleck has pulled out of presenting an award at next month's Oscars ceremony. He's been under pressure over claims of sexual harassment, which he denies. Wherever you are watching from around the world right now, it is either the 26th of January or will be very soon. And that means one thing for Australia. It is the country's National Day of Celebration. It marks the anniversary of when British settlers arrived on Australian shores for the first time back in the year 1788, when Captain Arthur Phillip, commander when the first fleet of 11 British ships arrived at Sydney Cove to signal the birth of the colony. However, there is some controversy around this. Some believe that the date should be changed, while others believe it should stay the same. But why is this? Indigenous and other campaigners believe the date is racist and divisive and glorifies an invasion by Europeans. However, many politicians argue the date is wholly appropriate and rightly celebrates Australia's past, modern multiculturalism and unity. For example, former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott believes that it is a great thing and the date should stay the same. But former Australian tennis player Pat Cash disagrees. Earlier, I got the latest from our correspondent Phil Mercer in Sydney.
What's supposed to be a day of great unity, Rico, is often tinged with great disunity. In the city of Melbourne, for example, we're expecting about 30,000 people to attend an Invasion Day parade, and that is replicated in cities such as Sydney and also other Invasion Day events in other parts of Australia. Now, Indigenous campaigners have long argued that the 26th of January Australia Day is a commemoration of genocide. The centre-right government here in Australia, led by Malcolm Turnbull, certainly doesn't see it that way. It believes that today is a great celebration of Australia's achievements, and it believes that the date does not need to be changed. So a very divisive day here in Australia. Many millions of people enjoying the festivities, but as we say, other Indigenous campaigners saying that this marks a day of Aboriginal dispossession.
And Phil, there are even some quarters who are calling for a national vote on the date and to let the people choose what they want.
There was a poll recently, Rico, that suggested quite a lot of Australians weren't even familiar with the origins of Australia Day. So this whole idea that the Australian people should be asked whether Australia Day should be today, January the 26th, or another day, one would imagine that there would have to be quite a lot of education put into that debate so that Australians can make an informed decision. But we've seen thousands of people take up Australian citizenship today, so clearly it's a very important date in the calendar for many people. But we have seen in the last 24 hours or so a statue of Captain James Cook, who was one of the early explorers from Britain who landed in Australia. That statue in Melbourne was defaced and daubed with graffiti. So once again, it is an illustration of how divisive Australia Day can be here.
Is the government doing anything, Phil, to resolve this huge divide?
Well, we've heard from various ministers today saying that they believe that the vast majority of Australians are embracing today. It is a public holiday. It is a day off work for millions of Australians. There are concerts, there are barbecues, there are festivities right around the country. And don't be mistaken for thinking that today is a very sombre day for the vast majority of Australians. It isn't. But however, there is a significant portion of the population attending those Invasion Day parades who have a very different view of the 26th of January.
Phil Mercer there on the Australia Day issue. Now, researchers have identified the remains of the earliest known modern humans to have left Africa. A new dating of fossils found in a cave on Mount Carmel near Haifa in northern Israel indicates that they left Africa up to 100,000 years earlier than previously thought. Our science correspondent, Palab Ghosh, has the details.
In the distant past, the first of our kind evolved in Africa. Our ancestors then left the continent and spread across the globe. Just when and how that happened is one of the biggest questions in human evolution. This fragment of a jawbone has shattered the current theory. It's rewritten the story of how we emerged on this planet. The jawbone was discovered along with stone tools in the Mislia cave in northern Israel. A study published in the journal Science shows that it's around 200,000 years old. That's tens of thousands of years older than scientists thought that modern humans first left Africa.
I think that the whole biological history of our own species should be revised. Because if we have modern humans here in Israel around 250,000 years, it implies that the origin of our species go back in time, not to 250,000 or 300,000 years ago, but probably much earlier, to around 500,000 years.
Theories about how modern humans first evolved and spread may now have to be changed. The previous view was that our species began to leave Africa 100,000 years ago. But the new discovery in Israel suggests it was much earlier, possibly 250,000 years ago. That means our species may have lived alongside other kinds of more primitive humans who lived outside of Africa at the time. And that contact may have helped to shape our culture and the way we look.
It changes really our understanding of the interaction between other populations such as Neanderthals. If we say that we have modern Homo sapiens in our area in these dates, we have to reconsider all our knowledge regarding the environment, the ecology, the culture, and our interbreeding with other populations.
The current view is that we evolved relatively recently, just as other types of humans were dying out. But the new study suggests that we're a more ancient species that shared the planet with primitive humans for tens of thousands of years. Pallab Ghosh, BBC News.
The television host Jane Xing is seen in China as her answer to Oprah's Winfrey of America. Both use television to promote social justice. Jane Xing is transgender and has a dating show that has been boosted by her popularity even more. Every week, parents of single men appear on the show to choose who they think is the best future wife for their sons. But critics say it's outdated, and Jane Xing's views on women are as well. Here's her response.
我是你们的红娘金星。
When I become a teenager, that time I start to have a doubting about myself. I said, maybe I'm the homosexual. Then I said, okay, what can I do? To tell anybody or kill myself? No. When I went to America to study modern dance, that time I was thinking myself, I should go back myself, find my own roots as a woman. Almost take my left leg away. As a dancer, it's a, terrible tragedy. I really fighting for my life to become today. I'm not showing my pretty face, perfect voice. No, I give you a life experience. That's why people want to see the truth. The truth, the real voice, I think attract people.
我们的口号是中国式相亲，有爸妈更放心。
身体得健康，心地善良，勤劳肯干，当家理财，不要美丽大方。
I still want to give people idea. Let's look at that. Even the young people fall in love today in 21st century. But when they come to marriage, the family still have a huge influence. That's still a big issue in Chinese society.
我们只是遗憾这个年龄差距太大，这是年龄问题。
理由太大，
年龄太大。
We cannot deny it. The society is still running the male mentality dominated. So that's the fact. It's still there. 你直男癌 and I said, no, nothing to do with me. I said, drop the show, look at me. What I done by myself. Of course, a lot of prejudice, disagreement still through me. But I think the society changing in the right way, direction. People much more tolerant, especially with the Chinese young generations.
Amazing story. Thanks for watching Newsday. Have a great day, everyone. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore.
And I'm Ben Bland in London. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.